Hi, in this video, I want to cover our pump process and pump policy. It is this document right here titled Pump Policy. It covers a wide variety of things, so I'm actually going to break this up into two videos. The first video, I'm going to cover the pump process summary, the pump policy, and the pump shop policies. And then in a second video, we will cover the pump shop procedures. For both of these videos, I want you to have the pump sheet handy, either printed out in front of you where you can make notes or on a screen. If you have a second monitor on the computer you're watching this on, you also need the pump reference sheet. This is the API pump reference and some of our definitions of things. I need you to have the pump material matrix open as well, or printed out in front of you. And then you may as well have the pump diagram as well. I'm not sure how much I'll be referencing this diagram in this video, but you may want it for your own reference and to take notes as well. Also, go ahead and get a notepad, an empty notepad out in front of you to take notes on as well. This document covers quite a bit, so sorry if this gets a little long-winded, but we do have a lot to cover. So with that, let's get started. So pump process summary are these two sections right here. So the pump shop is responsible for A, the accuracy of the pump sheet, B, the implementation of policy and procedure, and C, calling the company foreman before making mistakes. So the accuracy of the pump sheet. When you are working in the pump shop, you're most always going to be filling out a pump sheet as you go or after you complete a pump. You're going to be working with this sheet a lot. So you, as the person working in the pump shop, are solely responsible for the accuracy of this sheet, and we do need these to be accurate because we're going to bill people based off of what you put on this sheet, so it has to be done right. B, the implementation of policy and procedure. That's what we're talking about here. And you're responsible for that as well when you're working in the pump shop. C, calling the company foreman before making a mistake. That is basically saying if you don't know something, then you need to ask. Don't just kind of make a guess and go forward without really knowing what you're doing. There's never a bad question. There's never a dumb question. Even if it's something you think, oh boy, I don't know this, so I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to do it on my own, even though I don't remember. There's, even if you're supposed to know it, should know it, it doesn't matter. Just call and ask. We never mind people asking questions, even if it's something you think you should already know. Always ask. 2, no inventory of completed pumps. So this is one of our policies, is that we're not keeping completed pumps for people. We are going to have an inventory of spare pumps, but those are owned by mature fields until they're sold. And we're not keeping an inventory of completed pumps that are owned by any other company. So all customers' pumps are to be broken down into individual parts. So if we have a pump come in from a well from a customer and we run a spare and we're keeping that completed pump, or we're keeping that whole pump, then we're not going to keep it together. We're going to break it down into individual parts and either put them into the shop inventory, the customer inventory, or scrap the part or rerun it. B, all parts are either, this is what I just covered, rerun into the same well, added to the company inventory, added to the shop inventory, or scrapped. Yeah. Okay, this next section is titled Pump Policy, and we have pump description policies. So this is how we are describing pumps. So under pump policy, this is the first. We have a pump description policy that we'll cover first, and then this is another section under pump policies, which is the pump shop policies. But we'll start with this one. Pump description policies. All pump descriptions include the API, pump type, valve type, material description, and if need be, some notes. So this API pump type, I'm going to pull up the pump sheet. We don't have a. The API pump type is what's going to be described right here. Let me see. Okay, so in the material matrix, we have this example, and here's the full thing with everything mentioned right here: the API pump type, the valve type, the material description, and the notes. So here is the API pump type. It's this first section right here. We've got videos that cover what this is, so I'm not going to go into depth on that. So API pump type. These next two describe the valve types: double valve in this case, or single valve, or double valve, single valve. This next section right here is the material description, and this last section is the notes. So that is what that full description would look like. As you know, there's a full example of it. And so this is just filling in what each type, each one of those descriptions is called individually. So API pump type, valve type, material description, and the notes. So API pump type reference, pump reference, that is described here. This is the reference sheet you'll use for that. And again, we've got videos that cover this, so I'm not going to go into detail on it. If you've got any questions, you need to go back and watch that video on the API pump type reference document. There is a footnote here on this, and I'm not sure if it's covered in that video or not. Running a sliding sleeve. Add an additional dash and number to pump type after last extension. So we run sliding sleeves a lot. They're really handy for a couple different things, and so they're very common on pumps. And so what this line is saying, if you're running a sliding sleeve, add an additional dash and number to the pump type. Whoops. So it's talking about after this section right here. So this is the barrel length, the plunger length, the top extension, and bottom extension. So if there's a sliding sleeve, you'll put an additional dash out here, and then the length of that sliding sleeve. It'll probably always either be a 1 or a 2, depending on the length of the sliding sleeve. So it'll look just like this, just with an additional dash and a number out there in the description. The valve type. So standing valve, traveling valve. So in this description, so here we have the valve type section of it. This first part describes the standing valve. The second part describes the traveling valve. So all right, so DV is for double valve and SV is for single valve. So you'll always, in both those places, either have a DV or an SV. So if the standing valve is a single valve, it'll be an SV. If the standing valve is a double valve, it'll be a DV. Same thing with the traveling valve, either SV or DV. So, and again, it gives us an example right here. DV SV equals double valve standing, single valve traveling. So that is just to describe the valve type and whether it's double valved or single valved on both the standing and the traveling. C is the material description, the pump reference, material description table. We have a video that covers how that works, but that third section right there is where you describe the materials. There it is in an example. It'll be a letter number description. A note for that, in running a tubing pump, enter 0 for the valve rod guide code. So tubing pumps don't have a valve rod guide. And so, but here we have, let's see, a valve rod guide. So if you're running a tubing pump, on, so it would be right here, that number. So in this case, it's this 2 right here. That would be a 0 if this is a tubing pump, because there is no valve rod guide on a tubing pump. And I believe it's going to be the same thing with the valve rod. Enter 0 for the valve rod / valve rod bushing code if the pump does not contain a valve rod. So if it's a type of pump that doesn't contain that part, you enter as 0 under the material description for it. When more than one material is acceptable for a part, indicate by adding an optional part number or letter in parentheses. And here's an example of that. So right here. So A2, B2, C, parentheses, E, 11. So that C would indicate the primary material, the preferred material, and E would be the secondary. So let's go look at that on the pump material matrix. So C would be brass rubber lined, and then the secondary material to the preferred would be stainless steel. This code indicates if it is okay to run brass rubber lined or stainless steel cages. So brass would be the preferred because that's outside the parentheses. E would be the secondary. And this would be like if you get this description, if your foreman gives you this description and you're going to build this pump and we don't have the brass rubber lined, well, then the secondary is what you'll use. So in this case, it'd be the stainless steel cages instead of the brass. We want to avoid buying unnecessary parts. We don't want to buy a brass part if we have the same stainless steel part in inventory because, all right, we want to build it with brass, but we don't have the brass part. Well, we'd rather go ahead and get the pump built with the stainless steel than wait several days for the brass part to come into inventory. Okay, this next section is the pump shop policies, and it's got a few sections. 1 is the pump sheet, 2 is the used parts, and 3 is the spare pumps policies. So we'll start next with the pump sheet policies, and you'll definitely want the pump sheet ready in front of you to take notes, because in this part of this video is going to describe how to fill out this pump sheet, because these policies describe it for us. So A, pump description. So this is what we covered before. It should look familiar. So it's the API pump type, the valve type. Sorry, this is all popping up. The valve type, the material description, and the notes. And so on the pump sheet, that is going to go for both the pulled pump description and the run pump description. That is what this policy is talking about, is you always use this format. So B, pump sheet parts description. This is going to talk about each of these individual parts on here and how to describe them. So input the part's material, dimensions, and any special notes about the part if the material for the part is not described in the pump description and or part dimensions or specialty notes are required. So I went ahead and input a little example here in this description. And so that policy is saying input the part's material dimensions or any special notes about the part if the material for the part is not described in the description. So basically, if the material is not described, like up here, you'll need to put that material into as part of the part description. A lot of these would be described by this description right here, but we'll work on some examples here in a minute, and I'll explain that more. But if it's not described up here, then you need to describe it down here. Or if there's just anything special you feel like you need to describe about that pump, specialty notes are required. So 2, draw a squiggly line through the description if the material for the part is described in the pump description and no part dimension or specialty notes are required. So let's see what that would look like. So in this case, so this A2, let's see what that's talking about. Go over to the material matrix. A, so it's talking about the plunger pin, and the barrel. And 2 is the valve rod and the valve rod bushing. So A is plunger and plunger pins and barrels. So let's say if I didn't have this described up here, so let's just pretend that this material description isn't on here for a minute. I would want to put that right here. So plunger, I'm going to say SM for spray metal, and we'll just say Monel pin. Right, would be a description of that. I could put the size. Let's see. Actually, I don't have to put the size. The size is described right there, that 125. So plunger and pins, spray metal and mono. So that would be if I didn't have this description up here. But since I do, trash that. What would I would do instead is just draw a squiggly line. That's the policy. Is if you don't have the description up here, you describe it here. If you do, you just draw a squiggly line through it. Okay. So yeah, draw a squiggly line through description if the material for the part is described in the description and no part dimensions or specialty notes are required. So 3, ball and seat size. If the ball and seat size are all the same for every row, input the ball and seat size in the first row and 2 horizontal lines in every other row. So in every other row. Yeah. So if we're looking at the ball and seat, so let's say they're the same for every ball and seat. I'll come in here and say, let's say it's a 1 3/4 inch seat. Actually, I guess it would be ball size first. So let's say it's a 1 1/8 inch ball / 1 3/4 inch seat. So if that is the same for each one of these, what's the policy? If the ball and seat size are all the same for every row, input the ball and seat size in the first row and 2 horizontal lines in every other row following that. So if all these balls and seats are the same, then I'm just going to do this right here. However, I will say I think it's pretty unlikely you'll ever see all of these balls and seats the same. But it's pretty common you'd see for the that would be more of a size. I put that under the traveling valve. That would be more of sizes for like a standing valve. I think it is pretty common you'll see the same size ball and seat for traveling, and then a different size for the standing valve. So for traveling, you might see like a 1 inch. Actually, let's do the ball first. A 3/4 inch ball with a 1 inch seat, and then another of the same size for the double valve. And then for the standing valve, it would be like what I wrote for a 1 1/8 inch / 8 inch ball with a 1 3/4 inch seat. And then again, the same size for the double valve. I think that would be a lot more common, what you'd see. Now, if they're not the same, you'd have to write in each one. So, I don't know, you might see let's say a 7/8 ball with a 1 1/8 inch seat there, and then say maybe a 1 inch ball with a 1 inch seat. So if they're not all the same, you just have to write each one of them out. So that is what that policy is describing. All right, so that should cover the ball and seat sizes pretty good. Yeah, we covered examples for each one of these. Okay, so this last number we have here under this section, number 4, bottom discharge valve described in the open/closed/top plunger cage row. I think it is very uncommon. You'll come across this, but it is possible that this part would be included on a pump. You won't see it in the pump diagram. It's not going to be on here. It is a part that I think would go just above the closed barrel cage, so it'd be in between the barrel and the closed barrel cage. And it's what they call a discharge valve. It basically allows gas to leak out of the plunger and helps prevent gas locking. But I think it's rare that you will see one of these. But if you do, this policy is saying to describe it in the open/closed top plunger cage row. So on the pump sheet, we don't have a row for it. So you will describe it. You'll describe it in this row right here, the open/closed/top barrel cage row. Okay, so section C, we're going to talk about the run status, and then in section D, we'll talk about the pulled status. So run status is talking about this section of the pump sheet. So it is what is run into the pump, and it's going to describe what each one of these letters is used for. And so indicate N if the part was new and taken from the pump shop inventory. Indicate R if the part was rerun into the same well from which the pump was pulled. Indicate IC if the part was taken from the part company inventory and was a used part. Indicate IS if the pump was taken from the shop inventory and was a used part. Draw a horizontal line through all letters if the part was not used. So let's kind of make an example of that, right? So if I run a pump and the plunger came, it was new, I would circle in on that, right? If it was rerun, so if I filled out the pulled section of the pump and I reran the same plunger into a pump that was run, I would put the R for rerun. If the company has an inventory with us, so if we keep an inventory of the pump of a company's parts, so it's like parts that came out of old pumps from them and we scrap them. Remember we talked about that at the beginning of the policy, or we scrap them or keep them or something, and we pull a part out of their inventory and use it, then you circle IC. And then if it just came out of, it's a used part from the shop, the general shop inventory, then you circle IS. So that goes for all these parts on here, same with the barrel, the valve rod/pull tube, so on and so forth. It's all the same for all those. It's either new, rerun, the company's inventory, or the shop's inventory. All right. And then pulled status is going to be pretty similar. So the pulled status is talking about this section of the pump sheet right here. So each part that's on there is going to have one of these circled. To go back to this section, the run status, don't forget that last policy. I didn't talk about it too much, but draw a horizontal line through all letters if the part was not used. So let's see if I can come up with an example of a part. So an extension, that'd be a pretty common one that wouldn't be used on a lot of like bottom hold down pumps, which is would be a really common pump. If I don't use any extensions, you just draw a horizontal line. Just cross it out because that part was not run. Okay. Sorry, back to the pulled status. So very similar. Indicate S if any part was scrapped. So if you take apart a pump and you scrap the plunger, you'd put S on there. You'd circle S. Indicate R if the part is to be rerun. So it'd be that right there. You'd circle. Indicate IC if the part will be put into the company inventory. So if the company's preferences indicate that if any of our pumps that you break down, if the part is still good and you're not going to rerun it, then you put it into the company inventory. You'd circle that. And very similar, if the company preferences indicate they want to put it into the shop inventory, then you circle IS. Now, how between these two columns, how they would relate, if you think about it, if the status is scrap over here, it can't be R here because you scrapped that part. Well, you can't rerun it. But if the status is R here, then it must be R here as well, because if you're saying, okay, I found this part is good, I'm going to rerun it, R, well, then it's going to be R over here as well. I hope that makes sense. And then same thing with this one, draw a horizontal line through all letters if the part was not used. E is pulled condition, only applies to parts when they have been scrapped. So you only have to fill out this section, the pulled condition, if you scrap the part. And that is this column right here, pulled condition. And up here, we have the descriptions that you can put in under there. So let's say you take a pump apart and the balls and seats, some of the balls and seats are not looking too good. You might put IP XP for external pitted. XP. And then again, you would circle scrap on that because we only fill out the condition if we're scrapping the part. It just tells us why it was scrapped. And so you need to decide whether the part needs to be scrapped. If it does, you need to decide what's wrong with it. So is it fluid cut, chemical action, pounded, external pitted, internal pitted, rough, split, worn, scarred, scored, or broken? You need to put the description for one of those in here. Okay. Indicate the reason for scrapping the part. Any part scrapped should have a condition listed. And then F is the foreign material column. Indicate the type of foreign material found in the pump part. So, and I will say this does not just have to be for parts that are scrapped, because you might find sand in a part, but it's still good. And so any foreign material, if you find scale in it, you're able to clean the scale off, or paraffin, and you're able to clean the paraffin out and the part's still good, well, you would still want to put paraffin. So let's say you pull out the plunger and it's all clogged up with paraffin, or you find paraffin inside of it, then you need to put PAR right here. That doesn't mean you have to scrap it in a lot of cases. Sometimes it might. But a lot of times you'll be able to rerun these parts that have foreign material. This is just important because it's good to know what types of problems people are having with their pumps. You know, if they're getting clogged up with paraffin, people are going to want to know that, so they know to treat for paraffin. But I hope that makes sense. Get rid of this. Okay. G, leave no blank fields on the pump sheet. So we've described with the policies I've described here, every single one of these fields will get filled out one way or another. And then H, write 1 trip or 2 trips on top of the pump sheet. That is talking right here, and you can actually, you don't have to write it, you can circle it. If it's a 1 trip pump, circle 1. If it's 2 trip pump, circle 2. If it's a spare pump going out, you circle the spare. So moving on to this section 2, is the used parts. This describes our policies on what to do with used parts. So A, if company preferences indicate the shop inventory as yes, to run used parts, so when you're building a pump, run used parts from the shop inventory first. So we've got these company preference sheets that when companies start making their pumps, doing their pumps with us, they're going to fill one of these out and they'll indicate these preferences. Anytime you're working for working on one of that company's pumps, you need to pull that sheet. We'll have it out in the shop. You need to find their sheet and pull it out to see their preferences. So if the company's preferences indicate shop inventory as yes, to run used parts first for the inventory. So if let's say you're building a pump for them or repairing a pump for them, and they say yes on the run used parts or the shop use shop inventory parts, then let's say if you need to replace the valve rod bushing, well, before you go and grab a new valve rod bushing, you need to look in the shop inventory and see if we have one that matches the description, the material and everything, the size. If we do, use that one first. It's basically to save them money and use used parts instead of running new ones every time. If the shop inventory does not contain a required part, add a new part from the new part inventory. So try to run a used part first. If not, use new part. Tear down, place good used parts in the shop inventory. So same policy. If they indicate yes on the shop inventory, then that is where their parts go to, is the general shop inventory. B, if company preferences indicates company inventory, and yes, to run used parts. So this would be if they want to keep an inventory of their own used parts with us. Remember, we don't keep full pumps together, but we'll break theirs down. We'll hang on to the parts for them, keep them in a special place where we know whose they are. Then run used parts from the company inventory first. So same thing, if you need to replace a valve rod guide, and you go and they indicate yes on the company inventory, then you need to go and look for valve rod guides first. If you're pulling a valve rod guide off of one of this company's pumps and they indicate yes on the company inventory, then you need to put that with their pump parts. If company inventory does not contain a required part, add a new part to the new part inventory. So if you don't, you need to replace that valve rod guide, you check and see, they don't have a valve rod guide that matches the description, then you'll have to run a new one. And then on teardown, place the good used parts into the company inventory. Before placing a part into the company or shop inventory, clean and oil the part. So always do that. Don't put a dirty, gunked up, gross looking part into either the shop or the company inventory. Always clean it first. Okay. Lastly, and I'll finish this section or this video with this section, is the spare pumps policies. So when building a spare pump, complete the portion of the pump sheet. Trips equals spare, repaired by all of run. So if you're building a spare pump, you're going to complete the trips, you'll fill in your name in the repaired by, and then all of this. And this will say what that pump is. Put a tag on the pump with the description. Put the pump on the designated rack and keep the pump sheet in the folder. So spare pump is just one we're keeping in the shop, ready to run if we need to, ready to sell it if somebody needs it. So if you're building just a spare pump, you just fill out the run because it's a spare. Nothing was pulled for it yet. We just need to complete the run section of the pump sheet. B, when the spare pump is used, pull the pump sheet. So, let's say the company decides they want to use that pump. Well, you'll go and pull the pump sheet from where we store it in the folder in the shop. Break down the pump pulled from the well. So if this pump is going out to a well, then one has probably been pulled out of a well and is coming into the shop. Complete the remaining portion of the pump sheet. Build a replacement for the spare. So whenever the pump was initially built, this section gets filled out. Well, and maybe months later, weeks or months later, it finally gets used and we have a pump pulled for it. You complete this other section for the pump that was pulled on the same sheet that it was initially written on for the run. And then we always build a replacement for that spare that was used. Okay, I'm going to stop this video right here and we'll pick up in the next video and cover the pump shop procedure. I hope this video answered some questions for you and made sense and explained how to do some of these things. As always, any questions you have, ask me or ask your foreman. Thanks a lot.